Hello, good evening. It's March the 13th. We're doing Bible in a year and it's day 194. Can hardly believe we're nearly on day 200. It's amazing. We're on 2 Kings 24 verse 8 to 25:30, Romans 1:18 to 32, Psalm 84 8 to 12. And today we've come to the end of 2 Kings. So just to round up on this, looking at it, and I was just thinking at the beginning of the book we saw Elijah and he was carried up to heaven in a whirlwind. If we remember back to then, that great prophet Elijah, and he went for the destination that awaits those who follow God. He was taken up into heaven. And then we see here at the end, we see the two mighty powers of Israel and Judah. They were conquered, Israel by Assyria, and some 150 years later, Judah conquered by Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. Jerusalem was completely destroyed, and the majority of the population that was left was carried off to Babylon as humiliated slaves. And the consequences we see here of not obeying and following God. So that was quite interesting. And God sent loads, I think it said about 30 prophets to warn the people of their coming fate and the destruction. So they'd had ample warnings, but they carried on doing things their way, worshipping the idols and disobeying God and all the things they did through Kings 2 there. And God had been patient for hundreds of years, but in the end, enough was enough. And God's will be done, and they were destroyed. But we did see a couple of good kings in amongst it all, so it was good. We saw Josiah and Hezekiah. They were called good and obedient. However, all the rest didn't follow up the good works that they started, and revivals and the things they'd done, and that was the end of that. So now we come on to Romans. It's more than 1,000 years later, and Paul's writing his letter to the church in Rome, and he's talking about God's anger against mankind. And guess what? They're still messing up big time. And Paul says there's no excuse for not believing in God. He's revealed himself and made it plain what he's like in and through creation. You see it all around us, everything we see, the stars, the sun, the moon, the rain and seasons. Because people say, what about people who have never heard of Jesus? And so I've thought of that often, but here it says that it's in and around everything we see every day. And even without the Bible and the church, we have evidence of God's fingerprints all over nature, all around us, and in our lives, if we are willing to see them. I expect you've seen those are things in your lives too. I know that I have evidence that's shown in amazing ways that there is for sure a God and all the wonderful things he does. I remember in my early walk with God, and when he came into my life, amazing things happened all around me. It was a really bad time, and well, he just showed me that he was with me. And when I look back, it was all so intricately woven. Nobody could have written it and brought these people into my lives and to do what they did, and it was just amazing. And these are the ways that we see God, in big ways and in small ways, every day. Things that we do that people would just say, oh, it's a coincidence, and they're not. People come into our lives and into our paths that need to be there, and God brings them. So that's amazing. And I see it too in them, like the inner conscience of people. I think of young children. I think about my granddaughters, and my littlest granddaughter Sarah. She's nearly 18 months now, and they sort of know they're doing wrong without even being told. They look at you and they sort of sidle along, and they're going to do it, and they're going to touch it, but they know something's telling them inside that it's wrong, and they're not supposed to do it because they're wary, and they know that it isn't right. They're watching to see your reaction. So then there's a lot of people who know what they are doing is wrong, but they just don't care. They're the, I know it's wrong, but I really want to. I know it's dangerous, but it was worth taking the risk. They suppress God's truth to live their own way. And so when we look here at the verses, 24 to 32, we consider how Paul describes life without God. And 3 times it says that God gave them over to, in verse 24, to sinful desires, in verse 26, shameful lusts, and in verse 28, depraved minds. So in other words, God left them to it, to do what they wanted. So when people choose to ignore God and do it their own way, as we saw in 2 Kings, there are dire consequences. People think that life without God brings freedom, but actually there's no worse slavery than slavery to sin. Freedom comes only from God. And I'm reading this here, the list of all the things that is there now. I was just looking at this 29 and 30. They have become filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, greed, and depravity. They are full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, arrogant, and boastful. They invent ways of doing evil. They disobey their parents. They are senseless, faithless, heartless, ruthless. Although they know God's righteous decree that those who do such things deserve death, they not only continue to do these very things, but also approve of those who practice them. And so here we are reading this now, year 2012, nearly 2,000 years on from when this was written here in Acts, and in Romans, and we're still messing up. And we know that, like before, God will not let it go on indefinitely. He will step in and say enough is enough. And as before, God's will be done. His promises are yes and amen to everything. And we believe that's what he says in the things that in the nice promises, all the promises that he will never leave us and forsake us, and all those. So we believe those, and they're also in the other way too. God's promises are God's promises. And so to finish off quickly, I was just having a look at this Psalm 8:10. Better is one day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. Well, it's great. Actually, we sing this song as C3, but we haven't sung it for a long time now. Every time I read this, I feel like singing it. So I like the Cutlass version myself. But when I was reading that then, and you feel like you want to sing and you want to praise, just let you remember that we're worshippers. And so, let's start the day off right and spend time praising God when we're getting ready in the shower, driving to school, work, college, making breakfast, lying in bed, whatever we're doing. We'll sing or listen to praise CDs and start the day off good, focusing on God and bringing Him into your life straight away first thing in the morning. Because praise brings us into God's presence, the presence of the Creator of the universe, and that's an amazing privilege. And it's open to everyone. And we just thank the Lord that He's such an amazing God and He's so faithful to us. And that's all I got to say for tonight. So, night.